July 10th, 1944, near Saint-Lô, Normandy. Early morning, low clouds clinging to hedgerows. Oberstleutnant Hans Becker listens to the American artillery before he sees it. The sound comes first, a rolling, mechanical thunder that does not rise or fall, but simply exists. It presses into the chest, vibrates teeth, turns the damp Norman air into something solid. Becker stands in a shallow command trench, scraped into the earth behind a bocage line. His map case is open on a wooden crate. Pencils lie neatly aligned. The plan, at least on paper, is precise. Too precise. American shells begin to fall, walking forward in measured increments. Not random, not rushed. Each impact spaced as if plotted by machine. Becker checks his watch. They are late. Not by much, perhaps 6 minutes, but late enough to matter. Artillery should have lifted by now, his adjutant mutters. Becker says nothing. He is already recalculating. The German position here was designed for a very specific sequence. American bombardment, infantry probe, armored thrust along a narrow lane. Counterattack timed to the minute. Reserves moving on cue. Fuel trucks arriving just before first light. It is a beautiful plan. It assumes everything works. When the artillery does not lift on schedule, the first crack appears. American infantry does not advance where expected. Tanks do not funnel into the kill zone Becker has prepared. Instead, engineers begin cutting new gaps in the hedgerows. Smoke blooms where there should be none. Radios crackle with reports that do not fit the map. Becker realizes, with a tightening in his stomach, that the Americans are not reacting to failure. They are absorbing it. For years, German operational doctrine had been built on speed, precision, and synchronization. From the opening days of the war, success came from moving faster than the enemy could respond, forcing collapse before resistance could organize. It worked brilliantly in Poland, in France, in the opening phases of Barbarossa, but it relied on something rarely stated aloud: that plans would unfold as intended, that bridges would be captured intact, that fuel would arrive on time, that communications would function, that units would be where they were supposed to be. When those assumptions held, German operations were devastating. When they failed, there was little room to bend. In Normandy, Becker begins to notice something unsettling. American mistakes do not cause panic. They cause adjustment. A tank bogs down in mud. Another route opens. A unit is pinned. Artillery shifts. A bridge is destroyed. Engineers are already building a replacement. Becker watches an American company pull back under fire, a retreat that, in German doctrine, should signal opportunity. He orders his men forward. The counterattack lasts 8 minutes. Then American artillery returns, heavier, closer, more accurate than before. They had planned for this. By midday, Becker's position is no longer tenable. Ammunition is running low. Communications are sporadic. The reserves he was promised at dawn have not arrived, diverted elsewhere, he is told, by higher command responding to another emergency, and another. Each one breaks a piece of the larger plan. Becker folds his map carefully. It no longer describes reality. That evening, as his unit withdraws under pressure, Becker sees something that stays with him long after the war. American supply columns. They are everywhere. Trucks moving forward, trucks moving back. Fuel, ammunition, bridging equipment, replacement vehicles. Some are burned out along the road, victims of artillery or air attack. But for every truck destroyed, 3 more roll past it. The flow does not stop. Weeks later, Becker will sit in a POW enclosure, boots caked with dust, listening to American officers talk among themselves. Casually, one complains about a unit arriving late. Another jokes about a bridge that collapsed under a tank. A third mentions a fuel mix-up that delayed an advance. They are not angry. They are not alarmed. They speak as if failure is expected, even routine. Doesn't matter, one says. We've got backups. Becker freezes. Backups. In the German army, failure was not designed into the plan. It was something to be punished, corrected, or explained away. Plans aimed for perfection because they had to. There were no deep reserves, no redundant supply routes, no margin for widespread error. If something went wrong, it was supposed to be fixed immediately, or not at all. American planning, Becker realizes, is built on a different assumption entirely. That something will go wrong, and that the system must survive it. As the war grinds on, this difference becomes impossible to ignore. German plans unravel when a single link breaks. American plans flex. They bend, absorb, reroute, and continue. The Americans do not win because they never fail. They win because they expect to fail and prepare for it. Becker stares through the wire of the POW camp that night, listening to trucks rumble endlessly in the distance. He understands now why Normandy feels different from everything that came before. He is not fighting an army executing a plan. He is fighting an army executing a system, one designed not for brilliance, but for recovery. Section 2, built to bend, not break. August 2nd, 1944. Avranches, France. Late afternoon heat shimmering over packed dirt roads. Hauptmann Karl-Heinz Richter watches the American trucks with a mixture of disbelief and irritation. They are backed up for kilometers. Olive-drab GMCs idling patiently. Drivers smoking, laughing, passing canteens. The road junction ahead is clogged because a bridge collapsed under the weight of an overloaded tank less than an hour ago. In the German army, this would be a disaster. Here, it is an inconvenience. Richter is a logistics officer by training, a profession rarely celebrated in German staff circles. Combat arms win wars. Logistics, it is assumed, merely follows. Yet now, standing in civilian clothes behind POW wire, Richter cannot stop staring. The bridge failure does not halt the advance. It diverts it. Engineers fan out immediately. One team marks a ford downstream. Another begins laying prefabricated bridging sections brought forward hours earlier. Before anyone knew, the bridge would fail. American military police redirect traffic without shouting. No orders barked in panic. No furious phone calls up the chain. Just procedure. Richter turns to another captured officer beside him. "They planned for this," he says quietly. The other man nods. They always do. In German operational planning, logistics had always been shaped by urgency. Fuel was calculated tightly. Ammunition stocks were lean. Supply routes were direct, and therefore fragile. The philosophy was simple. Speed would compensate for risk. If operations moved fast enough, the enemy would not have time to disrupt supply lines. When it worked, it was devastating. When it failed, there was nothing beneath it. American doctrine is the inverse. Richter begins piecing it together, not from manuals, but from observation. There are multiple routes to every objective. Multiple depots feeding the same units. Multiple bridges planned for the same crossing. If one route is cut, another takes over. If one depot is hit, another releases stock. If one unit is delayed, another fills the gap. Redundancy is not waste. It is insurance. Richter recalls the winter of 1942 near Kharkov. One rail line cut by Soviet partisans. One fuel train delayed by snow. One headquarters insisting the plan proceed anyway. The panzers advanced and stopped. There was no alternate fuel source. No reserve stockpile. No flexibility built into the timetable. Men blamed commanders. Commanders blamed subordinates. The system blamed no one, because it had no mechanism to correct itself. In Normandy, Richter sees the opposite. American units advance, knowing some elements will fall behind. That is expected. The plan does not collapse when it happens. It adjusts. An American officer walks past the wire with a clipboard, speaking casually to a sergeant. "3rd Battalion's short on ammo," he says. The sergeant checks his notes. "We'll reroute the east dump." No urgency, no drama, just options. For German officers trained in a culture where precision equaled strength, this is deeply unsettling. The Americans are not more disciplined in execution. They are disciplined in contingency. Richter remembers German planning conferences before major operations. Timetables precise to the minute. Fuel calculations down to the liter. Reserve forces minimal, because reserves imply hesitation. Hesitation was weakness. Confidence meant committing everything at once. The Americans commit differently. They commit layers. As Allied forces break out of Normandy and race across France, German plans disintegrate under pressure that would have been manageable if there had been room to fail. Rail lines are bombed, fuel convoys destroyed, command posts displaced. Each disruption forces improvisation. Improvisation without resources becomes desperation. American columns, by contrast, slow down when stretched. They pause, reorganize, replenish. They do not fear delay. They fear overextension. Richter watches American engineers finish the replacement bridge. The first truck rolls across, then another, then a tank. The backlog dissolves as if it never existed. Less than 3 hours lost. In German doctrine, that delay alone might have invalidated an entire operation. That night, Richter lies awake, listening to the distant rumble of movement. He realizes something fundamental. German plans were designed to avoid mistakes. American plans were designed to survive them. One approach demands perfection from men. The other assumes men are imperfect and builds around that truth. When Richter is later interrogated by American intelligence officers, one asks him a question that seems almost naive. "Why didn't you have reserves?" Richter hesitates, then answers honestly. "Because we believed speed would make them unnecessary." The American officer writes something down and nods slowly. "That's where you lost," he says. Richter does not argue. By now the evidence is everywhere. In burned-out German vehicles, abandoned for lack of fuel, in intact American trucks, already rolling past the next obstacle. In a war that continues for one son and fractures for the other. The Americans are not winning because they never miscalculate. They are winning because miscalculation does not end the operation. December 18th, 1944, Ardennes Forest. Snow falling thick and soundless. Major Erich Vogel grips the edge of a map table inside a frozen farmhouse commandeered as a command post. A single lantern throws long shadows across the walls. The air smells of damp wool, sweat, and kerosene. Outside, engines idle, too few of them. Inside, the plan is unraveling. The offensive had begun well. Surprise achieved. American lines bent. Roads seized before demolition charges could be triggered. For 48 hours, it felt like 1940 again. Momentum, shock, opportunity. Then the assumptions collided with winter. Fuel trucks did not arrive. Captured American depots were smaller than intelligence predicted. Snow delayed columns that were supposed to move at night, undetected. And there were no reserves. Not of fuel, not of men, not of time. Vogel listens as a staff officer reports the obvious in a voice drained of emotion. "Panzer Lehr is immobilized. No fuel. 2nd Battalion is out of artillery ammunition. Radio contact with the rear is intermittent. Each statement alone is survivable. Together, they are fatal." German planning for Wacht am Rhein had assumed perfection because it had to. There was no margin for error built into the offensive. Every captured depot, every seized bridge, every hour gained was not a bonus. It was a requirement. If one link failed, the chain snapped. Across the snowbound ridges, American units are doing something very different. They are falling back, on purpose. Trading space for time. Time for supply. Supply for recovery. Vogel receives reports that confuse him at first. American units disengage, then reappear. Roadblocks melt away. then reform behind the Germans. Bridges are lost, then replaced overnight. The enemy is not collapsing. He is stretching. A captured American lieutenant, brought in shivering and exhausted, explains it plainly without meaning to. "We weren't supposed to hold that road forever," he says. "Just long enough. Long enough for what?" Vogel asks. The lieutenant shrugs. For the rest to catch up. That answer gnaws at Vogel. In German doctrine, retreat is failure unless ordered at the highest level. Units hold ground until destroyed or relieved. In American doctrine, withdrawal is a tool, a maneuver. By December 20th, American artillery begins to arrive in weight. Then more infantry, then armor, not all at once, but continuously. Vogel realizes the truth too late. The Americans did not need to stop the offensive immediately. They needed to outlast it, and they had planned for the inevitable mistakes. Missed orders, lost trucks, units arriving late. None of it mattered, because another layer was always behind it. German units press forward anyway. They must. Stopping means freezing in place with empty tanks. But moving forward without fuel is a slower kind of death. In one village, Vogel watches a German Panther abandoned intact, its crew gone, its fuel tanks dry. Beside it, American half-tracks roll past hours later, engines humming, snow chains clanking, fuel trucks close behind. The contrast is unbearable. By Christmas, the offensive is finished in all but name. German units are still fighting, bravely, skillfully, but the structure beneath them is gone. Fuel shortages dictate tactics. Ammunition shortages dictate targets. Time shortages dictate surrender. Vogel is captured on December 26th. No dramatic last stand. No final order. Just a quiet realization that there is nowhere left to go. In a POW camp weeks later, Vogel listens as American officers conduct an after-action review. They speak openly about mistakes, a misrouted convoy, a delayed artillery battalion, a breakdown in communications on the first day. They speak of them calmly, because none of them stopped the operation. One officer sums it up without ceremony. "We figured we'd screw some of it up," he says, "so we planned for that." Vogel writes that sentence down in his notebook that night. He stares at it for a long time. German plans assumed men would perform perfectly under impossible conditions. American plans assumed men would fail, and built systems to catch them when they did. That difference, Vogel now understands, is not about intelligence or courage. It is about design philosophy. One side built plans that shattered under stress. The other built plans that absorbed it. As winter drags on, Vogel hears rumors of the war's direction. The Rhine breached, cities falling, supplies flowing endlessly west to east. The Germans are still planning. The Americans are still adjusting. Vogel closes his notebook. The lesson is complete. You do not win modern war by demanding perfection. You win it by surviving imperfection. March 28, 1945. Near the Rhine River, Western Germany. Grey skies, thawing ground. Oberst Wilhelm Krämer stands with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the pontoon bridge stretching across the Rhine. He has stared at bridges his entire career, but never like this. The structure is crude at first glance. Metal pontoons, wooden decking, cables pulled tight by winches. Trucks roll across in a steady stream. Tanks follow. Engineers walk calmly between vehicles, checking tension, tightening bolts, making repairs while traffic continues. Krämer watches a truck stall halfway across. For a brief second, his instincts flare. In the German army, this would be catastrophe. The bridge would close. Traffic would back up. Enemy artillery would arrive. The timetable would collapse. Instead, an American engineer waves the stalled truck aside. Another vehicle pushes it clear. Traffic resumes within seconds. No orders shouted, no halt, no panic. The system simply bends. Kramer is a prisoner by now, captured days earlier when his unit ran out of fuel and orders simultaneously. He has been marched westward, past scenes that defy everything he was taught. American supply dumps stacked 3 layers deep. Alternate bridges built beside primary crossings. Entire units resting while others advance in their place. It looks excessive until he understands what it is protecting against. An American officer walking alongside the POW column notices Kramer's stare. "Impressive, huh?" he says, not unkindly. Kramer hesitates. "You built this knowing it might be destroyed." The officer nods. "Of course. And if it is?" Kramer asks. The officer shrugs. "We'll build another." That answer hits harder than any shell. Kramer thinks back to German river crossings earlier in the war. Single bridges, single routes, single schedules. They worked until they didn't. When one crossing failed, entire offensives stalled. There were no alternates, no reserves waiting quietly in the background. The plan was the bridge. Lose it, and you lost the operation. Here, the bridge is just one option. As the POW column continues, Kramer sees American units rotating forward. Fresh troops replace tired ones. Worn vehicles are being pulled aside. Broken equipment disappears into repair columns. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is irreplaceable. Later that evening, Kramer sits across from an American major during interrogation. The major asks routine questions. Kramer answers politely. Then, unexpectedly, the major asks one of his own. "Why didn't your plans account for failure?" Kramer almost laughs. "Because if we failed," he says slowly, "we believed the war would be lost, Masoud." The major nods, considering this. "That's the difference," he says. "We assumed we would fail. A lot. So we made sure it didn't matter." Kramer understands now why German officers are so shaken in captivity. Not because they were outfought, but because they were out-designed. German command culture punished deviation. American command culture expected it. German officers executed orders. American officers managed processes. One side aimed for flawless execution. The other aimed for continuity. By April, American forces are across the Rhine everywhere. Not through one perfect breakthrough, but through dozens of overlapping ones. If a bridge is destroyed, another already exists. If a unit stalls, another bypasses it. If an attack slows, logistics accelerates. The war does not pause for correction. Correction is built into it. Kramer writes a final note in his pocket diary before it is confiscated. They do not plan battles, they plan recovery. Months later, after the war, Kramer will testify to Allied interrogators. He will not speak first about tanks or aircraft. He will speak about margin, about how German plans demanded men behave like machines, and how American plans assumed men were human. The Americans did not win because they made fewer mistakes. They won because mistakes were priced in. When the war finally ends, German officers will look back on their finest plans. Beautiful, precise, doomed. They will realize too late that perfection is brittle, and that in modern war, survival belongs not to the flawless, but to the adaptable.